Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your normal partners in crime, Greg Thompson, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how are we doing?
7-3, baby.
Woo!
I'm on top of the world for right now. I'm sure that people are going to try the rest of the week to bring me back down as we look at closer at this game, and I hear that it was the Dolphins. But you know what? The Bills are 7-3. They did what they needed to do, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Absolutely. Really exciting for today. Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Thank you for all of our Cover One premium subscribers in the chat, already lighting it up, going crazy here. Today's show is presented by Uncle Jumbo's, some fantastic locally made delightful products to enjoy. Last week, I needed it to drown my sorrows. This week, I get to enjoy some of the fun parts of it to celebrate, and that's a lot more fun to have Uncle Jumbo's when it's enhancing the evening and not taking the edge off. So we'll talk a little bit more about them as we go, but I appreciate our primary sponsor, Uncle Jumbo's. It's a great day today. Just a lot of fun. I think there was maybe even a little bit more excitement than we anticipated. It looked like it really could get ugly at one point, and then a couple big plays let the Dolphins kind of hang around more than what they truly were. But, yeah, it was an entertaining day for me, and that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, really a dominant performance on 2 out of 3 phases of the game. And this is, you had put out a tweet about it, and I retweeted that tweet. And people get frustrated with coach speak and we got to perform in all 3 phases. We have to do it in all 3 phases. And people say, oh, okay, yeah, just score more points. But I think that this game was a great sign of you do have to execute in all 3 phases, because it did allow the Dolphins to hang around probably longer than they should have been in this game, the way the other 2 phases of this team dominated. And you get a couple of those big plays, man, it can really change the outcome of the game. Luckily, the other 2 phases dominated in such a fashion that it ultimately didn't matter. And they, for the last really 6 to 8 minutes of that game, it was pretty much closed up. But the Bills have to clean that kind of stuff up, because there's a bunch of opponents coming up where if you allow them to make some big plays in another phase of the game, you really have to play complementary football across the board.
Oh, yeah. And I, as normally happens, I got accused of being a homer and being an apologist most of the day on Twitter, which is fine. I'm a fan, and I'm certainly an optimistic fan. But it made me a little crazy when people kept talking about how close the game was. And the Bills scored the first 4 scoring drives of the game, up 3, up 6, up 13, up 16. And from that point on, once they went from up 6 to up 13, they were never within a score the rest of the game. Now, was it annoying that, hey, we bit and gave up a 50-yard pass that they converted in with a touchdown and made it 16-7? Sure.
Yeah.
We answered back with a scoring drive, and they came directly back with a 101-yard kick return. Sure, that's frustrating.
Super, yeah.
But, they were never within a score. So, it's hard for me to see that it was close at all. So I nitpicked with some people on that. But I certainly think there are some things for some constructive criticism. So let's start out on the offense. I stated earlier in the pregame show and then with a couple folks on Twitter, I think this is arguably Josh Allen's best game as a pro. And I think there's plenty to back that up.
Yeah, he loves playing in Miami. For one,
clearly.
He must the sunshine just hits him right. I think by far his best game, and really at a time he needed it. He didn't need it for guys like you and I who have been kind of pounding the table that progress isn't linear. He's going to have up and down days. It did seem like this week, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, within the media and the fan base, I don't know who drove the conversation this way or not, but it seemed like people kind of were coming out against Josh Allen and wondering if he was the guy, and starting to kind of beat that drum of is he the guy, and all the way up to the point where I heard people, and obviously this is the loud minority, but you hear people talking about, what's this offense maybe look like with Matt Barkley and stuff like that. And those are kind of frustrating things to hear when your team's 6-3. So I think it was an opportune time. We talked about it in the pregame show of a great time. I didn't care if it was a 300-yard performance or how he got the performance, but a confidence-building performance. And I think we saw that out of Josh today. Obviously, I think his best game as a passer, his best game with his legs of the year, and something you talked about a lot at the before we got into the year. He didn't need to rush as many times, but still have that rushing success that he had a year ago. So we saw a little bit of everything from him. Clean football. Again, I think this is now, the 5th game in a row with no interception. So he continues to play clean football and showed that he can really put the team on his back and be the entire offense.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other neat milestones that he hit. I think it's 6 straight games of 2+ touchdown passes.
Mm-hmm.
First one since Jim Kelly in 91. This will now be 5 straight games of 2+ touchdown passes and no interceptions, which might be a franchise first, actually.
Yeah.
I need to kind of check on that one. 63% completion percentage, didn't take a sack, had multiple third down conversions with his legs, 256 yards passing, 3 passing touchdowns, 56 yards rushing, a rushing touchdown, just critical clutch plays, great decision making. We'll get into it a little bit more with our Uncle Jumbo's responsible play of the game, but just smart decision making overall, and some things that I was really impressed with. And it just was a big relief. It's not anything against some phenomenal defense. It doesn't mean anything, that, hey, he's now some great thing that we didn't expect, but it was an opponent with a beat up defense. He came out, played a great game, and looked the way he was supposed to, and that's all you can ask.
Yeah, we've talked about it a number of times on this show that if you want to be a playoff team, and they, tout this playoff caliber mantra, if you want to be that, you don't make the schedule. So you got to come in, you got to beat the teams that you're supposed to be. And all year long, the complaint has been that they haven't beat teams enough. Today, that complaint really can't exist. They beat the team that they're supposed to, that they're better than on paper, and they did it in a dominant fashion, really across the board, outside of a few special teams plays. They really, put it to this team on the road too, which is a lot more difficult. Everything all right over there?
Yeah, almost a disaster.
Hey, that's what happens when you're live. But yeah, no, this is exactly what you have to do. There's going to be some more games up here that are going to be tough games that they're going to drop, that they're not going to run the table here to finish the year. But you got to go into these kind of games and establish confidence and beat them. And I think this was a nice kind of confidence building game for most of the unit, obviously not special teams. To continue, we got some tough games coming up.
Yeah, moving into the rushing game, 34 rush attempts, 168 yards rushing, 4.9 yards an attempt. A nice game out of Devin Singletary, 15 carries for 75 yards. That's literally almost exactly what I would want from him every week. Right there, had one target. I wouldn't have minded a couple more targets in the passing game. He did put 2 on the carpet. Was fortunate that he recovered one of them and that John Brown fell on the other one. And you could tell in the fourth quarter that they did lean towards Frank Gore and that they didn't sit him the rest of the game. But I only remember Singletary coming back in for one more drive and maybe 2 more carries after that. So I don't mind that when you're up 17, that you can kind of, give him a little bit of tough love there. But beyond the 2 fumbles, those are not acceptable. I thought Singletary looked nice today. And this was the exact kind of balance I want to see, with 15 carries for Singletary, 11 for Gore, and 7 for Allen. That's almost exactly what I would design if I could do it from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much talked about that going into the game this week, that, we wanted around that amount of touches, but they didn't have to be 20 touches for Singletary, that we wanted some designed runs for Allen. I know that people have hated that, but they worked again with good success here this week. He had one nice rush from McKenzie, which he keeps being able to be that gadget guy. And when his number's called, he has some success. I think that was like a 9-yard run, 10-yard run from McKenzie there. Great play there. As far as the discipline, yeah, I do get it, but I had a bet with you, and it ticked me off a little bit because
I'm not at all jaded by that. That did not influence me thinking it was a good decision at all.
I do think at that point in the game, they didn't end up doing what I think is the intelligent thing, and we'll probably talk about that later, about continuing to run the ball and get conservative. And I thought there was probably a good opportunity, had he not fumbled up to that point, for Devin Singletary to go over 100 yards the way he was running at the time, the way he had found some nice holes throughout the game. I thought he had the shot at going for 100 yards today, so I wouldn't mind seeing another 5-6 carries for him and getting to that 20 mark. But I'm very comfortable with where he is. If he becomes that guy, a 15 carry, 70, 75 yard a game guy, I'm super happy with where he was picked and who he was.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I said, if we could get his 15 carries and let's say 3 to 4 targets, 4 to 5 targets, it's perfect. So, I thought the usage was great. Great call on the McKenzie, end around there, that they've been getting that jet motion with at least one pop pass, one end around, all season. So that's great.
And that call came at a perfect time. I know people have been real tough on Dable, and even to start the game, people were frustrated because the Bills didn't put up touchdowns every drive. On the first few drives. They were only getting field goals. I know that's a touchy subject with the Bills Mafia, but I thought he called a pretty good game. Obviously, there's going to be flaws, but that was one of the better play calls. I thought was that it wasn't jet sweep, but it was an end around to McKenzie. Just the timing of it was perfect, kept that drive going.
Oh, yeah. I mean, looking into the receiving game, this was by far the biggest statement of there is no two lead receivers. There is no mix at the top. There is John Brown and everybody else. And,
Right.
14 targets, a couple times, even maybe a little bit to Josh's detriment. There was one drive late in this first half where we were driving down to try to get some points possibly. And he was absolutely laser focused in on only John Brown, but
Right.
Brown ends up with 9 catches for 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, a decent get. Cole Beasley caught all 4 of his targets for 38. I don't recall Dawson Knox dropping the ball, so he caught 2 out of 3 for 32 and a nice touchdown with a broken tackle and yak for it. Overall, he had completions to 7 different receivers. I thought it was a really nice distribution. I wouldn't mind a little bit more mix and not, half of the targets to John Brown, but he certainly made up for it today, or made it worthwhile today with his best game as a Buffalo Bill and maybe as a professional. But overall, I thought it was a nice performance by the receivers as well.
Very nice performance, yeah. And the thing that I noticed was, I think at least the top 3 guys had some yards after catch, which is something we really haven't seen this year, whether it's good tackling from the other defense or just guys not getting the opportunity to shake loose and get much. But we saw yards after catch from all those top 3 guys at the top of the receiver list for this week. I'm still frustrated with the lack of a third wide receiver. Obviously, McKenzie had 3 catches. I'm very frustrated the fact that we can't get Foster going. Duke Williams continues to be a healthy scratch in this offense. I'm very excited with what John Brown was able to do today, and the stretch of games he's had with 50 yards or more, and he's putting together a really nice season. When you play really good teams and really good defenses, at some point he's going to get taken out of the equation. How does this offense able to do what they did today and what they've been able to do previously when a team comes in and takes John Brown away? I don't know how the passing game looks without that, because I don't even know if there is a third wide receiver option on this team. So yeah, it's top heavy. He had a good game. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but like you said, there was a few of those drives where Allen was so hyper focused on him. If a team comes out and takes that away, it could be a really long day for the Bills. So they got to get somebody else going in this offense at some point here over the next few weeks, because at some point someone's going to take John Brown away, and he's not going to have, a big catch, 50-yard day. He's going to have a quiet day at some point, and that could really hurt this offense.
Yeah, and I think looking at the last piece on the offense, the offensive line and the tight ends, Ron brought it up in the chat here. There was no Lee Smith penalty today. That was so exciting.
I wonder what his snap count was, though. I didn't see a lot of Lee Smith.
I saw a fair amount of Tyler Kroft.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure how much he played, but he didn't get a penalty, so I'll take it.
That might have been what you said, though, in the pregame show, that this would be a good game where, you had these, we're not going to come out and bench you. You're not going to play a lot. I don't know what the snap count was. I didn't kind of focus on that, but yeah, he didn't have one. But Kroft did have a pre-snap.
He had a false start
in the red zone, which is super frustrating because he might as well just have Lee Smith in there.
Yeah. So, I will say the rest of the offensive line, if you have a game where we run for 168 yards, 4.9 yards an attempt, and have 0 sacks, you have to call that a great game by the offensive line. Now, I don't know if it's going to grade out that way and that each guy individually did that. I remember multiple times commenting on, holy crap, Josh sat there forever waiting to decide who to throw to. So there were certainly plenty of plays with dominant pass blocking. They obviously opened up some holes on the run game, had some creases that Josh was able to go through. So unfortunately, it does look like we lost Ty and Secchi to a pretty serious injury here.
That's not a good thing.
Got rolled up at the bottom. Your best case scenario is that it was a brief dislocation and just a bad high ankle sprain. Most likely, our friend Kyle Trimble said that, all intents and purposes, it looks like a fibula fracture, and you're just hoping it didn't also fracture the weight-bearing tibia, which can be much more difficult, especially for a big guy like him. So obviously we won't know more for now, but it is absolutely a relatively long-term injury. We'll find out very soon if it's season ending, and it does appear that that's very much in the cards that it could be season ending. So I wrote this at the time that obviously our primary thoughts are with Ty and Secchi. He seems to be a really good dude who deserved kind of a second chance here that the Bills are giving him. And that's a shame. We hope he's healthy and has a chance to come back and earn the rest of that contract. However, from a Bills strategy standpoint, offensive tackle depth is now a problem.
Big problem.
And that I don't even know for sure who the third guy is now behind Cody Ford. And it scares me that my brain is telling me Ryan Bates, and
Yeah.
that we need to now kind of scrounge around and look. I'm going to have to take a look after the game at who's on the practice squad, who's an available option, and are we simply going to have to carry that? And this brings into some of those things that I think fans underestimated, the loss of Adrian Waddle early in the offseason, that when we lost him in preseason, this should be a great time to now have him as a swing tackle that's available behind Cody Ford and as a veteran voice in his ear. And I'm hopeful that that doesn't come back to bite us, and that Cody Ford is now able to step into that role. He did have a pretty solid game last game, and obviously today looked pretty good other than one penalty.
That wasn't even a hold, if you ask me.
Yeah,
They called it on the wrong guy. I'll have to go back and look at the play, but it was not a hold on Ford.
Yeah. So, obviously just trying to make sure that we're balanced here, looking at everything. I'm hopeful that doesn't come to bite us, but the next 2 weeks being Von Miller and DeMarcus Lawrence, we're going to find out real quick.
Yeah, no, it's not a good thing. Ford came in and did fine, I think, in cleaning up this game. The game was pretty much out of reach. Like you said, they did score a couple times, but the game wasn't a competitive football game. And again, it was the Dolphins. They don't have some of the guys that we're going to be facing here coming up. But what I've seen out of Ford does not make me feel great as far as the pass rush comes up with some of the guys that they're going to be facing. I think teams are going to really attack him and his lack of athleticism, his lack of ability to get out, especially with speed rushers. It's a big problem. And if he is a problem, like you said, I don't trust that Ryan Bates is going to come in and do any better. In fact, I think it's going to be a lot worse. So I don't know who's out there. Probably not a lot of guys at this point. I think there's only so many Corey Legions out there that you can just pull off the street and they can come in and perform. So it's going to be interesting to see what Brandon Beane does here and how much faith they have in the guys that they have on the roster currently.
Yeah, I'll go as far as to say that that doesn't exist at offensive tackle. I think that you can find a Jay Ajayi that the Eagles just did at running back. Sure. We snagged a Corey legit. That you have a guy like even in the secondary. I think that there's, once healthy, we have your man EJ Gaines floating out there. That doesn't exist at offensive tackle. If you are capable of being on an NFL roster at offensive tackle, you are on the roster right now.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is.
The squad somewhere though.
Yes.
Got tape on that we don't know about. So we'll stay focused. You'll see something, I think, early in the week this week. If Nseki's out, they know it. He's gone for the year. They're going to make a move.
Yeah. And this is where Dan Morgan and Joe Shane and guys like that make their money. Pro personnel guys, they know the league. They know who's hiding out there. This is where you go snag one of those guys. And maybe from a team that, it's not like the NBA with buyouts and stuff like that, but curious to see. Sometimes you see some late season moves like legit that was released by the Raiders and some other moves. Maybe you'll see some teams that are out of it.
A year ago.
Yeah, same way. So, and Jordan Phillips too, so maybe we see a move like that where we could pick somebody up. But yeah, certainly a concern. Before we flip over to the defensive side of the ball, let's talk a little bit more about our primary sponsor here and presenting sponsor, Uncle Jumbo's. We like to talk about it from, the idea that when you're enjoying some Uncle Jumbo's and they have their Berry Good, they have their Bluesberry lemonade, they have their traditional vodka and all the good stuff going on there, that you need to do so responsibly. So we've thought that a good way to bring that up is to talk about Uncle Jumbo's responsible play of the game. And I think we both had some different ones here today. I'm going to go with the overall strategy of Brian Daboll and the balance on offense, that we got a little bit pass happy last week. This week, even early in the game, before the Bills got the lead and started to milk it, it was a very balanced approach, mixing in runs even when the pass was working. It ended up 33 pass attempts to 34 rush attempts, and even that with a couple of scrambles from Josh Allen, it was 37 called passes to 30 called runs. And that's almost the exact ratio I'd like to see right there at 60-40, 58-42. That kind of range is exactly what I'd like to see and what I think works for this team. And to me, that's where I'm going to go with my Uncle Jumbo's responsible play of the game is Brian Daboll's call for balance on offense. And I thought you had a really good one as well.
Yeah, I was confused in the moment because the CBS broadcast, the Bills went so quick. I think it was somewhere late second quarter. They came back to the line of scrimmage, snapped the ball. It was 12 men on the field for the Dolphins. in the Slack, everyone's like, what's going on? You called it pretty well right there and said, hey, whoa, wait, I think that the Bills, that was intentional, and the Bills did that. And even CBS was off on that. And it's something that we've seen the Patriots do for years. It's something we've seen.
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, really good teams that have their head in the game, are well coached. We see it happen all the time, and we saw the Bills do it today. And it might not have been the biggest play of the game, but it was a heads-up play that gives you free yards. It gives you a free set of downs. Like that type of stuff makes all the difference in a close game. So you got to do it when you have the opportunity to do it and see it, and that's in their heads, and it shows us that they're capable of doing that kind of smart play. And in a really close game against a good team, that's the kind of stuff that makes all the difference.
Oh yeah. And I think that's a great call for exactly what we're talking about here. Uncle Jumbo's responsible play of the game. That's the kind of heads up play calling that we want to see. And that, as you continued on there, we talked about it. It wasn't just that play. Josh hurried up there. We got the free 5 yards. Then he rushed up. They had a different play call. You heard him audible into the quarterback sneak, picked up the first down, and those two heads up decisions, he got us a free first down in a play where, I don't know that rookie year Josh Allen is doing that back-to-back setup of catching them 12 men on the field and then getting the audible into the quarterback sneak for the first down. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, and that's progress. Is
Yes.
progress mentally for him, that he's got the mindset of understanding where in the game he is. Situational football is something that the Bills talk about a lot. They haven't always been great at it this year with the situational stuff. We saw that last week, and there were some questions about the situational football at the end of the game. But it does show, I think, that they practice it, that they're trying to drill it into these guys, and that's an indication that coaching isn't as bad as Twitter would tell you that it is, that they are coaching these guys in situational football, and it showed itself today.
All right, let's move on into the defensive side of the ball, which today was phenomenal. And I know that at the end of the game, when you look and that technically there was 323 yards passing, 280 net yards, because there were 7 sacks by the Bills defense. 13 carries for 23 yards rushing by the Miami Dolphins. And that, I know the score doesn't look like a dominant defensive performance, but when you think about the fact that there were really, one kick return for a touchdown, another 50-yard kick return. We'll get to the wonders of the special teams in a bit. And then you talk about one big offensive pass play. All of a sudden, 4 of their scores are accounted for in 3 big plays, and the rest of the day the defense absolutely shut them down. And I thought overall this was one of the more impressive defensive performances we've seen since the early part of the season, where we were talking about, are they the best in the league?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly hard to shut a team out or keep a team from scoring, especially when your special teams gives up big plays, especially when the defense is out there quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't due to the offense giving the ball up. It was the offense was continuing to score. That's another way to keep your defense out on the field, is you keep scoring and keep sending them out there. So I thought they were phenomenal. Clearly, obviously, there is a bit of a curve. It doesn't discredit the victory, but there was a bit of a curve facing Kalen Balaj this week. He hasn't been a great running back coming out of college. Yeah, he needs, Eric brought it up in the Slack channel. We both liked him in the draft process, but he needs a great offensive line, and that is not what he has in Miami. So there's some of that, but a lot of it was scheme too. And Adam Archuleta on the CBS broadcast kept going back to how the Bills were shifting at the line pre-snap, how they were bringing the blitz, which is something that they haven't put on film a ton, and the way they were doing it today. Eric had it on his segment on WGR. What was going to be one of the keys to the game was getting after Ryan Fitzpatrick in this game. And they had him, he didn't have a comfortable spot barely at all this game. I'd say maybe 20% of his dropbacks, he had any type of comfort in the pocket. And a big sign of that, I think, was a healthy Matt Milano. I think he's finally back, feeling fully healthy. He was explosive today, and bringing the explosive athletic linebackers, this modern day NFL linebackers, bringing those guys, man, that's a tough group to try to block if you don't know who's coming, and those guys can fire off at any point. I was super impressed. Tremaine Edmonds had a fantastic day today, and I think when the all 22 comes out, the guys that really dig down and watch that, they're gonna be very impressed with what Tremaine Edmonds was able to do today.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it was exciting to see how they did the game the way that they did, and to be in the position where, you're talking about 14 quarterback hits, 9 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, and not just one guy having a dominant game. You're talking about a sack from Corey Luget, Jerry Hughes, Shaq Lawson, Jordan Phillips, Ed Oliver, Star Latuile, and a shared sack from Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. And that even Star Latuile chased down a screen for a tackle for a loss besides the sack. You were talking about across the board production from every single, key member of that defense, and not needing to depend on Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde having huge tackle games like we have sometimes. I thought it was really, really encouraging, and one of the most well-rounded games we've seen in a while, and they needed to. Miami doesn't have a great offensive line, but they did what they needed to and had a really dominant defensive performance, in my opinion.
When this defense is playing at its best, and this is the issue that we've had probably the last month of football for them, when the defense is playing at its best, it is the 1 of 11. They embody the 1 of 11 mindset for this defense. No one person is coming out and having the most fantastic day and being an all-world beater, except for Trey White's done it a couple times. But it's when everybody's playing, and that one way when you box score scout, which we don't love, but one way to tell when your defense is playing 1 of 11, when you see 7 sacks and you see everybody kind of getting involved in that. A lot of those sacks wasn't on the guy who ended up with the sack, Star Latuile being a prime example. That wasn't a sack that he created. That was a sack that 4 or 5 other guys created. And we saw Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds creating a lot of pressure and getting other guys involved and getting them sacked. So that's an indicator, I think, of the 1 of 11, and they needed that. This was obviously, it was a good confidence boost for Josh Allen, but I think more importantly, it was a confidence boost for this defense, because I do still think, even though Josh Allen had a big game and we're going to need him to play well throughout the year, we need this defense to get back to where they were to start the year if they want to really be considered a prime spot wildcard team. And hey, if the Patriots lose here in the next couple hours, a team that may be able to even fight for a division, the defense has to get back to being elite. And I think today was a good stepping stone against the bad team to get things right and get that confidence back in yourselves.
Absolutely. It's what they're supposed to do. We're not trying to celebrate this as them blowing out the Ravens or the Patriots or any team like that, but they took care of business, did what they needed to do. And honestly, the only reason it doesn't look like more of a blowout is the special teams. So let's shift over there. Now, I'm going to start with some of the good parts. Once again, Andre Roberts looked nice. He's a talented player that takes advantage of creases. He's aggressive, but knows how to keep sound possession of the ball. I like that he hates calling fair catches on anything. Had a 44-yard kick return and looked good overall, making plays. Steven Hauschka bounced back with a stellar game, made a 51-yard kick right off the bat, 3 for 3 on field goals, 4 for 4 on extra points, was right back to being money. Corey Bojorquez was 4 out of 5. 4 of his punts were really good.
That's a Corey Bojorquez game, though.
Yeah, one of them was really, really bad, but 4 of them were actually really good. He gave up almost no punt returns at all. They fair caught almost every single one, or it was out of bounds. One of them just happened to be shanked for 36 yards. So that's the good. On the bad side, we gave up a free onside kick that the kicker dribbled it 10 yards and recovered it himself, which is horribly obnoxious. And then I don't want to give him an out that Saran Neal did go out with a concussion in the first play of the game, and that then all of a sudden Jakeem Grant ended up with a 100-yard kick return and another 50-yard kick return. But either way, whether we're dependent on one guy or not, we gave up far too much kick return yardage that allowed a team that we dominated to feel like they were in this game.
And Grant's a weapon. Don't get me wrong. He's a weapon. He's done this to other people before, but it's embarrassing. And especially when you have the amount of frustrating plays, the onside kick out of nowhere. And granted, this is the dangerous part about playing a desperate team that just wants to one-up you. And like maybe a team playing for a playoff spot doesn't pull an onside kick at that moment in the game, right? They have nothing to lose. They're the Miami Dolphins right now. They don't have anything to lose. And smart on them. Good for them.
Oh, no. They had just scored on a surprise play when they hadn't crossed the 50 and had like 8 total yards of offense to that point.
Absolutely.
They cracked a 50-yard pass. They scored, and they thought, hey, we could recapture some momentum and get back in this game.
Yes.
Good for them.
Good for them. If that was the only downfall of the special teams on the day, I can cut them some slack. Sure. That you're not prepared for that, that's fine. But then when you compile it with the returns, it's just super frustrating. I absolutely hate having to talk about special teams constantly being a problem for this team. It's not ever just one part of the unit. Like you said, Hauschka had a bounce back game. Fantastic. But it seems like it's always something with this unit throughout the year, and it's cost them games. It cost them games last year with Danny Crossman. It doesn't feel like a lot has changed. And I know Farwell's a young coach. I think the talent's better than Danny Crossman had a year ago. I think the bottom of the roster is better. I felt like some of that you could wipe off with Danny Crossman and say, hey, you know what? They're taking their medicine, as you like to say. The bottom of that roster was terrible a year ago. Much improved. So the excuses are a little bit less. The frustration feels the same as it did this time last year with Danny Crossman. I don't feel like a lot has changed with that unit as far as discipline goes, as far as making plays goes. And I just hope it doesn't continue to linger on. I think this is the one part of the team. On Twitter, we're mad at Josh Allen all the time. We're mad at the amount of touches for Devin Single. I think the thing that we probably all universally should be the most mad at collectively is special teams as a whole unit this year so far. And I hope that they press Sean McDermott on that and get something corrected.
Well, look at the impact on on our toxic differential.
Yeah.
The Bills, just offense versus defense, the Bills should have had 7-2. When you add in special teams, all of a sudden it's 8-5. And that's, I think, exactly exemplifies the game in that it was a 17-point game. The Bills were in control the entire game. They scored the first 4 scores of the game. They were never within a score the rest of the game. So this was never a close game, but it was closer than it should have been. And 7-2 in toxic differential shows you a blowout, whereas 8-5 kind of matches 37-20, and that looks about right. And that lets you know that, just like you said earlier, that when they do the coach speak about all 3 phases of the game, it's why it legitimately matters. You have game field tilting plays that put the offense in a great position and put the defenses back against the wall, and we allowed them to do that or score directly on their own by just producing their own points. And I think toxic differential really spoke to that this week, and that so even if you count some of the other defensive plays, they went 1 of 4 on 4th downs. So that's 3 turnover on downs that you could even count that would even look like 11-5 if you counted the defensive side of the ball. So special teams keeping that closer than it really was matches up both in what we saw and in the toxic differential.
Side note, a fun toxic differential play. It was only fun because it ended up going in our favor. Was on the Hearns incompletion. They called it an incomplete pass on the field. It ended up being a fumble. Great challenge by Sean McDermott. He's gotten a lot of bad. People have been on him about his challenges and the process of what he challenges plays. Great call by him to challenge that play. I think at the time the Bills were up 4-2, and that would have made toxic differential 4-3 on that play because it was like a 23-yard pass play, and it ended up swinging it 6-2. That's big in a game against anybody when you can have that type of swing. So good on Sean McDermott, and that was a fun little within the game toxic differential swing in the Bills' direction. And man, those are money. If we look at toxic differential and the success and all that thing, if you think that's a thing that matters, that was a big play in this game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now let's get into our players of the game. And it's fun to have a game like today where it's hard to pick, between how many played well. That's always a good problem to have. So we'll start out on the negative side of it. On the disgruntled, where did your disgruntled decision go to?
Yeah, it wasn't. So like I said, I keep a list of all my positive plays and negative plays. There wasn't a lot, actually. Like they played a pretty clean game for the most part. There was a few penalties, bad penalties, and things like that. But really, it came down to special teams for me, and so I had to give it to Farwell. I guess you could maybe give it to Levi Wallace. It's hard watching the broadcast to see if some of that stuff he was just keeping in front of him, but he wasn't great with tackling today. So he was probably my runner-up, but it was special teams, and it wasn't even close. So Farwell, sorry, buddy. That's 2 times now this year that special teams are getting called out.
Yeah, and I'll flip it the other way. That I thought on what was a generally dominant performance on the defensive side of the ball, you could tell that Fitzpatrick was picking on Wallace, and that I think the starkest difference was you could really see how positive things went when we swapped in Kevin Johnson. And I have to think that there is a pretty strong inkling. I don't know if we're going to see a full Ty and Secchi, Cody Ford rotation like we have on offense, and that maybe they go a rotation route. I wouldn't fault them if they consider starting Kevin Johnson going forward and rotating in Levi Wallace and maybe go 2/3 to 1/3 the other direction. Kevin Johnson looked really good today, came up strong in his tackling, was making plays on the ball, was aggressive, using the athletic ability and performance that made him the 11th overall pick when he came out in the draft. And that I like Levi Wallace. I spent a lot of the week defending him. I got a chance to go on a couple other shows and got asked about Levi Wallace a couple times. He is a scheme-dependent player who is fundamentally sound and does what you ask him to do. But if the offense schemes specifically at him to get him isolated, he doesn't have the physical skills to hold up. And then if you combine that with poor tackling, which he had 2 different times today, I think that really makes things dangerous. And that, I don't think it was terrible. It was just that when we don't have a ton of other negative things going on and I don't have a specific player to pinpoint on special teams, I'll go with Levi Wallace as my disgruntled for today.
It's going to be interesting to see how they juggle that going forward, because I think of it in the terms of basketball where, like, you got a guy that's a pretty good shooter and he's in a funk. You kind of want him to keep shooting. You still want to get Levi Wallace out there a bunch. I know fans are probably going to call for Kevin Johnson to start, and I won't be surprised if they give him the start. But like you said, I think there'll be a heavy rotation because they want to get him back in and build back some of that confidence. It's really a matter of confidence. And I know people don't think momentum is a thing that matters, and some of these things that can't be quantified, like confidence and those things, but they're real and they're out there. And the only way to gain that back is from getting out on the field and trying to make the most and gain some of that back. So I think it'll be a healthy rotation, but I won't be surprised if Kevin Johnson is getting the start here going forward. But don't expect to see no Levi Wallace.
Yeah. Let's go on the gruntled side of it. Who gruntled you the most today?
Josh Allen.
Yeah.
It was closer, I think, though. He had a fantastic day, his best day. It's easy to pick the quarterback. They have the ball in their hand the most. Yep. When you have a performance like that, it's going to be easy to pick him. But my runners up, and I really considered Matt Milano. I thought had a fantastic day. He was all over the field, doing all kinds of things. And even Tremaine Edmonds, he didn't have as great of a day, I think, all over the field, but he was pretty solid. The linebacking core really impressed me today.
Yeah, and I think it is a great problem to have today, looking at, who made impact plays. And there were so many guys on the defensive side of the ball all over the place. I think it's a shame that I believe our 2 best offensive performance of the season both happened today, from John Brown and from Josh Allen. For John Brown to have 9 catches for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns is just phenomenal. 15 yards a catch, first downs over and over and over again. He was such a phenomenal player.
And Needham's a good young corner. Like that was a nice battle going on.
Oh, yeah. Needham was giving him all he could handle. I was actually really impressed for a guy that I don't honestly remember his name in the first matchup that we played. And then all of a sudden I heard people talking about, this guy Needham's been looking pretty good. I heard his name 2 or 3 times in the prep for the show, getting ready for this week. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, yeah, that's a guy.
It was a nice battle.
Yeah, they might have stumbled on something there. So that's good for them. But still, John Brown was such a force today. I still gave it to Josh Allen. I think that today might have been his best game as a professional. 4 total touchdowns, 312 total yards, 63% completion percentage, 8 yards per rush, no turnovers, not even any fake fumbles that we recovered and had good luck on. It was just a phenomenal game. Great decision making. I don't think he had any, turnover worthy throws. There was maybe 1 or 2 throws that, John Brown was fighting with the DB for, but they weren't, overly aggressive, reckless. And that, I know it was a cliche. I know it was a huge talking point for most of the media on the debate between what is fearless and what is reckless. And I thought Josh Allen was that today. I thought he walked that line perfectly, made aggressive plays. They stayed aggressive in their play calls and were throwing the ball even at the end of the game when maybe they should have been salting away the lead a little bit more. And I just thought it was phenomenal and a really, really well done game overall for Josh Allen. And I think he earned my gruntled of the day.
Yeah, no, he absolutely did. Like I said at the start of the show, it couldn't have come at a better time for him with just the pressure that's been building up here in the media. And I know that they take some of that with a grain of salt of what's being said in the media, but it was a thing this week in the press conferences with Sean McDermott. He was frustrated. It became a thing when Josh Allen got up there. So this week, I'm sure people still kind of harp on some of the things and who the opponent was, but at least for this week, he answered some of those questions. And he didn't get the big 300-yard day, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of, whether you're a stat guy or an all-22 guy, I don't think people are really going to have a whole lot to nitpick. There's still flaws in the game. There's still stuff to clean up, and Josh will be the first one to say that. But very impressed with how he handled the team that he should go out and handle.
Oh yeah, and I think another great takeaway for kind of the McDermott approach of taking a look at what was out there. The Bills had multiple scoring drives today, and they put together 7 different scoring drives. All of them were significant number of plays: 7 plays, 11 plays, 5 plays, 7 plays, 6 plays, 9 plays, 8 plays. All of them except for the one where we did get the turnover was 27 yards. All the rest of them, 81-yard drive, 62-yard drive, 75-yard drive, 53-yard drive, 62-yard drive. No cheap, easy points, no defensive points, no special teams points. The Buffalo Bills offense earned and scored 37 points with 424 yards. That is a stellar offensive game, and that's phenomenal for this offense. That's as good as you can ask, and I think that's as much as you can answer with.
He didn't complete a 30-yard
pass,
so there's still
why does that matter? Why does that matter
in our
Aaron?
bets? It matters in our bets, but I'm sure there's going to be people on Twitter that were pounding that drum and are, well, he still hasn't done it yet. I will say he didn't miss the guy. He didn't miss John Brown by 5 yards when he did put it up a bunch of air yards. He did have the 40-yard touchdown pass, but we'll get the air yard people, and it hurt you.
Yeah. Well, and let's get into that. I did dig my way back a little bit today. I think overall I went 3-1 in our wagers.
Yep.
And let's start with the one we're talking about. The one that you got was that I wagered that Josh Allen would finally get off the schneid with a 30-plus yard air yard
4-yard short
completion. He did hit John Brown for a 40-yard touchdown, but only 26 of those yards were in the air. So unfortunately, I fell 4 yards short on that one. And I think there were 2 other pass attempts over 30 yards. So I think he's now over 33 on the season instead of over 31. So that adds to that. And the same idea, 256 yards versus 300 yards. He still hasn't had a 300-yard passing day. But that first bet went to you.
Yeah, and we already touched on the other one, one of the other ones, Devin Singletary. I had a 99.5. Yeah. I had him over there. I still think if it wasn't for the lesson on the fumbles, I think he had a shot at it. I really do. But, you know what? I'm happy for you to get back in.
Yeah, I think I hit the John Brown over yardage on like the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
So that one hit pretty quick. And then the other one was matching Tyrod Taylor's last Dolphins game. Josh Allen beat him in passing yards. Josh Allen beat him in passing touchdowns. And Josh Allen beat him in rushing yards. So he cleared all those, and he had a rushing touchdown when Tyrod didn't have a rushing touchdown. So overall, a very solid game for Josh Allen beating those, and thankfully helped me to a 3-1 victory, 15 points to 5 points, and dug me out to from a 21-point hole to a 11-point hole.
Yeah, so right now I'm up 45 to 34 in our bets currently.
Yeah.
So next one more nice swing like that, man, and we're back to even.
One more thing, just kind of poking around the league today. I know next week we're going to be playing the Broncos. Early in the game, everyone was saying, oh, wait, we better watch out. And we still should. They did jump out 20-0 on the Vikings, who are a stellar team. They somehow allowed the Vikings to come back and pull that game out 27-23, and they gagged away a 20-point lead. So we need to be aware of that. That's a team that put up a 20-point lead on a very talented team in Minnesota. They're going to be coming their second week in a row on the road coming into Buffalo. I would much rather play Denver in Buffalo than in Denver. So that's one I'm happy about being at home. But that's coming up here. Some of the other games, the Ravens blew out the Texans, so knocking the Texans actually out of the division lead, and the Colts win over the Jags put them into the division lead. So the Bills are currently the holders of the fifth wild card spot, the 5th playoff spot, which they have been for a while. They have a full game lead over the next team and a 2-game lead over most participants. For any Bills fans listening now, by the time you hear this, we'll be rooting for the Bengals to upset the Raiders. Obviously, the Eagles to hold on to their 10-3 lead on the Patriots, and then see what happens with maybe a little bit of an upset of the Chargers over the Chiefs and see where things shake out. But a big game next week at home against the Broncos, and what I consider a must-win with what the rest of the schedule looks like.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one, even though they blew the lead. Minnesota's playing actually really well right now. I think Kirk Cousins has finally found his groove over there. They're starting to get things corrected after all the media hype with Diggs and all that. I think they're playing really good football. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that one. That'll be one that obviously we watch as we lean towards that here midweek. But that's going to be a tough team, especially with Ty and Secchi out, man. Von Miller matched up against Cody Ford is something that terrifies me and is probably going to keep me awake because I don't want Von Miller touching Josh Allen. I really don't. I think that he's going to have maybe a few times where he tees up and touches Josh Allen, and that doesn't make me feel too good.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to have to watch. I'd like to see this be a big two tight end set game. Let's kind of tee off, maybe wear them down with the run game, a lot of play action, give Cody Ford a lot of help with Von Miller there, and make sure that we have Lee Smith, Tyler Croft, Dawson Knox over there chipping away at him and not leaving him on an island for that speed rush, because we've seen what happens when you leave him on an island with that speed rush. But we'll get into that in this week's preview show on Wednesday night. Before we sign off, where can the people find you?
You can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. Mostly the last couple of weeks, just talking about how pointless 300-yard games are for some reason. It just keeps getting brought up. I keep getting tagged in it, and I just keep proving over and over again that it's totally pointless.
Yeah, I've been similar, having discussions that hey, we're not saying it's a bad thing. We're just saying we don't think it matters all that much. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Greg Thompson, GregTompsett, floating around. Had a couple different guest spots on some shows this week. Had fun with some of our other podcast brethren. You can wherever you're listening to us, please go out, give us a rating, give us a review, give us a share. If you're stopping by your local alcohol provider, pick up some Uncle Jumbo's, our fantastic presenting sponsor today. But today was a wonderful show. It's always great to do it when you're talking about a fun Bills win. They took care of business, beat the Dolphins 37-20. You have been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and we are out.